Okay guys, this video is going to be focused on extrusions. Extrusions are something we have hopefully covered a decent amount of and you've played with a lot on your own. So I'm going to try to go pretty fast here through the beginning. We have our extrusions first thing in our features tab. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to take some area and basically stack it on top of each other until we get a volume. So I like to talk about extrusions like a bunch of post-it notes just being stacked on each other until we get our total volume. So what you're probably very used to doing is using the blind feature for this. This is great. It allows you to set how far your extrusion is going. You can type in whatever you want there. However, it is limited in its ability to be updated and used in a lot of cases. It's very common and it's normally the best thing to do, but we're going to talk about all these other pieces here. First one I want to talk about is that midplane. It seems like such a simple piece here. And of course, it's not saying midplane where I pause the video. So I'll switch direction there and we move to midplane. So midplane here, what midplane is going to do is it is going to make it so that you have even extrusion on either side. I really like this because when we use this, we can actually have our parts start up so that our overall center, our origin point, is in the center of the object, which is very helpful when we start getting to mates and assemblies. So tends to be where I like to put things. I like to start, if I'm starting with an extrusion, I like to start with a mid-plane extrusion. With that, we have the ability to go in two directions independently. With our blind function, we can actually set it to different lengths on each side, which is a little bit fun. It's just going ahead and clicking on that extra direction, adding that extra piece. Nothing too crazy there for you. Okay, what might be a little bit crazy is this piece. So you probably have not seen it before, because when we're taught how to do this, we're taught how to do this normally with lofts. So what draft is basically saying that we are slowly either making our shape smaller, we're cutting evenly out from the edges of our post-it notes as we stack them, or we are having our post-it notes grow somehow evenly as we stack them. It is limited to an even, we have the constant shape growing as it goes. We can't have that shape change or anything like we can when we get into our loft command. But it's there, it's available, just so you know it's there. With this, we do have the opportunity to switch the directions of that, but that is the loft. Next piece is important to know, mostly because a lot of the time you'll accidentally do this without wanting to. And this is thin feature. Thin feature is basically saying, instead of taking the area that you think you're selecting, we are going to take the outline of that area, or we're going to take a series of lines. And within the thin feature, what you're seeing here is I'm messing with how the shape is set up on either side, how I'm defining the thickness of my line that I'm extruding. I can go ahead and mess with those numbers all I want, whether I want to have it on the inside, on the outside, centered, which is normally what you want to do for thin feature, or if I want to have some funky set for each of them. So I'm going to go ahead and fly through this a little bit. If I jump here, what you will see is that sometimes what will happen is you'll automatically have that thin feature checked, and you'll actually notice that it's not letting me uncheck the thin feature. Because if we look at my drawing here, I switch to a different drawing of my square where we are not actually connected. We don't have an area that we can extrude. We can only work with the line itself. One piece, if you do happen to be using this for something to keep track of, is that as you set up your direction for your thin feature and your shape for your thin feature, what I'm trying to point out here is that if I reverse it, I can't actually have my volume interfering with itself. We can't have a volume that is running into itself. So you saw there when I increased this size, all of a sudden my piece disappeared. What would actually show up if I were to have a preview is something like this. So I've got my volume is now too big based off of that thickness that is self-intersecting, which SolidWorks just can't deal with. It won't combine itself into a regular square for you, which is good because if you wanted a regular square, you probably would have drawn a regular square. With that, next piece that we're going to talk about is we actually have the ability, so somewhat sweep-like or somewhat loft-like, we can actually follow a path. When we extrude, you're probably very used to just extruding. You're going 90 degrees, you're going straight out from your shape. What I can actually do here is I can actually select a line to follow for my extrusion. And as you saw, it doesn't actually have to be a line that is directly on it. We could actually have it go the opposite way of our line and set our extrude, and we can still use other features with this, like our draft. Again, I don't know why you wouldn't just use a loft for this 9 times out of 10, but it is there for you. With this, it is important to realize that this line can be from anywhere. We use the top, the bottom, the middle. We can also use a line that is completely elsewhere. Or even if we wanted to, we could have the volume follow a different shape for us. One more thing before we get into the meat of the video, and that piece is just remembering that when we do our extrusions, we actually have the opportunity to select what contours or what areas we want to work with, right down where I'm clicking on right here. So with that ability to select contours, try to make sure that if you have multiple areas, you're selecting those areas. And normally, unless you have the funky bug that you saw at the beginning of the video where the hidden line was actually acting, the construction geometry line that I had was acting as a line. Normally, if you have construction geometry, it will ignore it. As you're seeing here, we're not actually getting, I'll draw it on. We're not actually getting a separation from these lines because they are set to construction geometry, which is part of the beauty of construction geometry. It doesn't get in your way because it knows that it's just for making the sketch. It's not for actually extruding it. So with that, let's get to what I really want to make this video about. And that is these extra commands here. So instead of blind, when we're working with a piece, we have all of these extra options. Simplest of which is the through all command. Through all basically has it extrude in that direction until it has reached the outermost limit of where your volume currently is. And what I did is I made it as a separate part, and you can kind of see that we have that straight extrusion all the way through as far as it can go. That is the end of our part. Somewhat useful if we don't want to have something that we have to update every time. If this should always be the longest extrusion, it should always go to the end. Let's say I change this radius down here, or I change this size somewhat such that this piece gets larger. What's going to happen is it's automatically going to update how far that extrusion goes for me, meaning that if I update my part with one dimension, it's actually updating this extrusion automatically for me. Now that is not nearly as useful as this up to surface command. So again, this is a tool that allows us to automatically update our extrusion if we were to update some geometry. In this case, if we move this surface, change this surface, or change the sizings of this piece is always going to go right up to that surface. And you notice even the part that is not intersecting with that surface is making it there. With this, we do have the offset from surface command. If we want it to match a surface, we want it to bounce one way or the other, just a little bit further, just not quite as far, we can do that as well. Next piece that we're going to note here is that we don't actually have to use the first surface. I can actually select the second surface. It ignores the first piece it hits, and it continues all the way to it, including this section that we're now overlapping. So you're seeing that I'm not hitting the first surface. It's completely ignoring the first surface. It's going to the plane, the shape made by the curve of the second surface, and everything's stopping there. If I do want it to stop, we have what I think is the most useful of these, which is my up to next command. And what this up to next piece is doing is it's going to bring everything right up to the point where it will hit some form of already existing geometry. So you're seeing here that I kind of have the combination of the two up to surfaces, because those are the two surfaces that it first hits. Really useful, really helpful, something that is just going to keep updating no matter what. It's also very helpful if you have some weird geometry that you can't extrude right up to, because you'd have to have some weird shape to it. It's going to automatically fit that shape. In this case, I've actually given us a body that's thick enough that if we did a square extrusion, it would actually run up to it and the square would be intersecting within it. But if this was much thinner and we did the square extrusion, we wanted to extrude it all the way, we might have a little bit sticking out the back that we don't want to be happening. Okay. Next piece that I have is up to body. It's going to work just like up to surface, except in this case, if you did happen to have multiple bodies, it is going to extrude up to the point wherever it hits the body that you have selected. So there are, within this day of class, we're actually going to talk about working with different bodies. So you might see how that is useful there, but it is an option for us. Next piece that we have is up to vertex, vertex being some point that we're selecting. So when I select this line, it chooses this top point, and it basically does a square extrusion that far. This case, we're not changing the geometry. We don't have any of those weird cuts that we were doing previously, but we do have the extrusion going to some automatically set length, meaning, again, we don't have to type in a number here, meaning that we don't have to update a number here, which is the important thing. Okay, playing with vertex here. Last piece that we're going to talk about, and instead of looking at it with the mouse, I'm going to look at it with the pen here. Everything that we're going to talk about, so for all of our extrusions, there is the extruded cut version. For all of our revolves, there's the revolved cut version. For all of our sweeps, swept cut, lofts, lofted cut. All of these pieces, the opposite version exists for removing material. So what you're going to see here is we can do all of these things that we previously could with the extrude command. Instead of adding materials, we're removing the material. We're cutting. We have, acid paper clips that are being used to remove the material as they get stacked up. So we're able to cut through our parts to whatever distance we want. And what you're going to see is like this one, I'm using the through all command, which is very common for something you want to do with cuts, or through all both, so you're cutting everything out of the way. But we can do up to surface, up to next. In this case, next, it just goes through the next body. It's not going to stop at the first body because, well, it wouldn't cut anything in that case. But it goes completely through the first body. It goes to the first point where it is leaving material. It's probably a better way of putting it. In this case, I don't have an example set up for leaving material. Up to surface, we can see that we're cutting that nice clean surface. And yeah, it's really exactly the same as all of the extrusion stuff. So I don't want to spend too much time just talking about stuff that you hopefully can already figure out on your own. With that, this is pretty much showing everything that I wanted to show for reviewing our extrusions. Please do remember that we have these automatic options that are going to update for you and give you a better